You feel something has changed, but you don't know what. The things that used to fulfill you no longer make sense, and that quiet restlessness keeps coming back. If you've been questioning everything, if your dreams speak louder than your routine, maybe your soul is trying to wake you up. This video reveals the signs that almost no one notices. Deep symbolic signs that are often ignored, but that announce the beginning of your true awakening. The signs that your soul is awakening. You'll understand why nothing feels the same anymore, and why this is the best thing that could happen to you. Suddenly, something you can't name starts pulsing inside you. It's not noise, not pain. It's a kind of internal murmur, almost like an ancient whisper surfacing again. You don't know where it comes from, but you feel you're no longer who you were, and you don't yet know who you're becoming. It's like being between worlds. You no longer belong to the old one, but you still don't understand the new one. This unknown territory, however uncomfortable it may seem, is the silent beginning of the soul's awakening. The things that defined you no longer make as much sense. Titles, roles, certainties, they all begin to dissolve like mist in the sun. There's a strange sense of displacement, but it doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, as if a part of you were watching yourself from a distance, waiting for you to notice that something greater is moving. This something doesn't shout. It just pulses, insists, returns. It's the soul's call trying to rise above the ego's noise, and when you start listening, nothing can satisfy you the same way anymore. It's exactly at this point that many confuse confusion with crisis. But what's happening is a deep reorganization, what Jung called individuation. The superficial self begins to lose strength, and the psyche, guided by a symbolic intelligence, begins its transition. Often, this manifests as discomfort without apparent cause, a desire to change without knowing what, uneasiness with everything that once seemed right. And it's here that the soul begins to call for meaning, pushing you toward a search that can no longer be postponed. At some point along the way, what once fulfilled you starts to seem shallow. No matter how much you distract yourself, keep busy, achieve things, the emptiness continues there, subtle and constant, like a question echoing deep in your chest. Is this all there is? This discomfort isn't weakness. It's the beginning of the crossing. The soul, once awakened, begins to refuse the superficial. What once entertained now bores. What once seemed sufficient now provokes silence. And it's in this silence that questions begin to sprout. These aren't ordinary questions, but the ones that deeply disturb. Who am I really? Why am I here? What am I doing with my life? This thirst for meaning doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's a clear sign of the soul's awakening. It's as if a dormant part of you had been activated and now demands answers that the external world can no longer provide. This is the spiritual calling, intimate, urgent, non-negotiable. Depth psychology understands this point as a spiritual crisis, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that transforms. Many try to silence this restlessness with new hobbies, new loves, new jobs, but it returns. It always returns. You might be sitting in traffic or washing dishes, and suddenly there it is, the question that won't be silenced. It's at this exact moment that some people start seeking books like The Power of Now, or dive into studies about Carl Jung, trying to understand what's happening. And little do they know that the soul is just beginning to speak through dreams. It's at night that the soul usually speaks loudest, and it doesn't use ordinary words. It uses symbols. During the spiritual awakening process, dreams change. They become more vivid, loaded with images that don't make sense at first glance, but awaken something ancient inside you. Carl Jung called this the language of the unconscious. It's as if the psyche, without the ego's censorship, takes advantage of sleep to reveal what the waking mind isn't yet ready to face. You start dreaming of falls, flights, mysterious animals, labyrinths, people who are gone. Sometimes you wake up with your heart racing, not from fear, but because something in the dream seemed too real. as if you had visited another dimension, and in a way, you did. The soul uses these images to reveal forgotten fragments, unresolved conflicts, buried desires. The inner transformation begins to take shape through these symbolic narratives. They're encrypted maps sent directly from the unconscious to guide you. Those who start paying attention to this naturally feel the urge to record, to interpret, to understand. The old habit of ignoring dreams dissolves when they begin to leave emotional traces throughout the day. And if you commit to writing them down, in a notebook by your bedside, for example, you'll notice patterns emerging, archetypes, repetitions, scenes that connect with what's happening in your waking life. It's as if the inner universe begins to synchronize with external reality. And that's when emotions gain a new intensity. Suddenly, something simple moves you. An old song, the way someone holds a cup, the sound of rain hitting the window. Tears come without warning, and not always from sadness. It's as if your heart had lost the armor that protected it from the world. This sensitivity isn't weakness or instability, it's openness. The soul, in its awakening, fine-tunes your senses so you notice what once went unnoticed. It's a way of reconnecting you with what's essential. The soul's awakening amplifies what was dormant: empathy, intuition, presence. You feel others' pain with a clarity that didn't exist before. Mundane situations pierce through you as if they were profound. Sometimes it's exhausting, but it's precisely this excess of feeling that reveals an expansion of consciousness. The soul doesn't want you to merely exist. It wants you to live fully, and living fully means being vulnerable. Sensitivity becomes a lens, not a burden. Many at this point seek shelter in art, nature, or practices like meditation and conscious breathing. Other times they become interested in topics like spiritual self-knowledge, or discover authors like Clarissa Pinkola Estes or Eckhart Tolle. Emotional depth calls to them, not for drama but for truth, and the more the soul opens, the more it begins to filter out what isn't authentic. And this filter starts manifesting in relationships. Without major explanations, you start pulling away. Conversations that once flowed now seem forced. Environments that were once familiar now drain your energy. It's not arrogance or superiority, it's instinct. When the soul awakens, it develops a silent radar, a kind of internal compass that clearly shows you where you no longer fit. It's as if your frequency had changed, and certain vibrations simply started causing interference. You notice you no longer have patience for emotional games, gossip, or relationships where only one side gives. And the most curious thing is that this happens without drama. The distancing is silent, like someone leaving a dark place upon realizing there's an open door. The spiritual crisis sharpens your criteria. You no longer want crowds, you want truth. And when you start hearing the soul's call, it begins cutting out the excess. It doesn't just want to survive, it wants to breathe in peace. Many describe this process as a natural cleansing, and that's exactly what it is. Without fully understanding, you start seeking calmer environments, more conscious people, deeper conversations. You might feel lonely, but this loneliness is fertile. It's here that many find refuge in solitary walks, retreats, books like Women Who Run with the Wolves, or even practices like journaling. But when silence starts to disturb, something even deeper surfaces: the nameless crisis. You're doing well, everything seems in order apparently, but inside, something collapses. An anguish without clear cause, an apathy that appears without warning, anxiety that doesn't obey logic. Nothing external justifies what's happening, but still, the pain is real. This is the mark of silent crises that accompany the soul's awakening. Jung called this phenomenon the individuation process, a symbolic collapse of the false self, so the true one can emerge. Often this crisis hits hard, as if something were trying to escape from inside you. But instead of looking at it with curiosity, the initial tendency is to resist. You try to rationalize, explain, return to normal. But this normal no longer serves. The soul, upon beginning its inner transformation process, disorganizes what no longer belongs. What seems like chaos is actually a restart, and there's no way to rebuild without first allowing the old structures to crumble. The spiritual crisis can seem like an emotional breakdown, and sometimes it is, but it's also a rare opportunity for alignment. It's at this point that some people seek depth psychology, Jungian therapies, or get in touch with content they had never explored. They begin to record emotions, search for hidden meanings, listen to their own symptoms with attention. And if they look with sincerity, they'll realize they're not going crazy. They're awakening. And the next symptom is clear, an insatiable thirst for depth. For out of nowhere, that video about spirituality makes more sense than any trendy series. A passage from an old book resonates stronger than a long conversation. You find yourself diving into topics that once seemed distant: symbols, archetypes, soul, unconscious, purpose. This fascination isn't a phase, it's a reunion. When the soul awakens, it begins to remember what was dormant. And everything that touches the sacred somehow attracts you, as if there were an invisible magnet pulling you inward. The surface is no longer enough. You want to know more, understand more, feel more. The search isn't just for knowledge, it's for meaning. Suddenly, concepts like individuation, shadow, myth, synchronicity become part of your vocabulary. But more than that, they become part of your experience. It's as if each Carl Jung text were a window into yourself. The external world continues, but the real journey begins within. It's an expedition into the unknown, but one that, curiously, feels familiar. At this point, many begin studying psychological astrology, diving into books like Man and His Symbols, or feeling affinity with traditions like Kabbalah, Zen, shamanism. But not as escape, as return. It's as if the soul recognized its fragments scattered across all these paths. And the more you get involved, the more you notice a strange coincidence repeating. Right people, right content, right moments. It's not chance, it's synchronicity. And it begins to intensify in a way that's impossible to ignore. You think of someone and they call you. You talk about a subject and hear the same theme hours later. You begin to feel that certain coincidences have too much meaning to be called chance. This is synchronicity, a central concept in Carl Jung's depth psychology. When the soul awakens, it begins to communicate through these subtle signs. Intuition sharpens, and what seemed like coincidence reveals itself as connection. It's as if the universe conspired not to please you, but to align you. Your perception changes. Before, you ignored hunches. Now you start trusting them. Small internal certainties emerge from nowhere, and even without explanation, you feel you should follow them. Intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. And when you listen, it reveals paths that linear reasoning can't reach. This is scary because it challenges everything you were taught about control. But it also liberates because it shows there's something greater in motion, something that connects the inner world to the outer, like mirrors of the same flow. Many people start noting these coincidences and are amazed by the number of patterns, repeated numbers, recurring symbols, seemingly random encounters. It's at this point that the person realizes the soul is weaving meanings in the invisible. Some seek to strengthen this connection with practices like symbolic tarot, intuitive writing, or studying synchronicities in their own stories. And the more the flow intensifies, the more you feel the need for silence. Because that's where messages become clearest. There comes a time when noise gets tiring. Crowds no longer please. There isn't always sadness involved. It's just an inexplicable desire to withdraw, to be alone, to be silent. The awakening soul demands space, and space isn't conquered with more stimuli, but with less. The need for silence imposes itself like an internal hunger, and conscious solitude becomes medicine. You're not running from the world, you're returning to yourself, because certain answers only emerge when the world falls silent. It's in this silence that the soul speaks loudest. You begin to notice there's too much noise around. And inside, too. Social media, shallow conversations, chaotic environments. All of this starts bothering you in a new way. Not from intolerance, but from sensitivity. Inner transformation needs time, quietude, solitude. And this solitude is different from sad loneliness. It's fertile, reflective, regenerative. It's in this withdrawal that many begin to meditate, walk in silence, or write to organize internal chaos. The search for silence isn't passivity. It's deep listening. And when you start listening, you realize that many of your beliefs aren't yours. They came from outside, were inherited, taught, imposed, and in this silence, the soul begins to challenge these beliefs. It doesn't just want peace, it wants truth. And to get there, you'll need to question everything you thought you were. Suddenly, everything that seemed solid begins to shake. Beliefs, opinions, absolute truths start seeming fragile, almost artificial. You realize that much of what you carry wasn't born from you, but was learned, copied, inherited. And this creates discomfort. It's like taking off tight clothes you've worn since childhood without ever questioning them. The soul, at this stage of awakening, wants freedom. And to be free, you need to unmask what was imposed as truth. The ego likes certainties. The soul likes questions. Questioning old beliefs isn't rebellion. It's spiritual maturity. You begin deconstructing labels, religion, politics, identity, career, even ideas about what's right or wrong. And this can generate guilt or confusion because the entire system was built to keep you fitting in. But the soul doesn't want fitting in. It wants authenticity. And when you start asking yourself, is this really mine? The transformation accelerates. This identity collapse opens space for deep reconstruction. Some people at this point seek works like The Gifts of Imperfection, or delve into philosophical lines that challenge the norm. Others begin rethinking their own name, lifestyle, even relationships. Everything goes through a new filter. Does this reflect who I really am? But before this new self fully reveals itself, a strange sensation emerges, as if something invisible were conducting all of this behind the scenes. You begin to feel you're no longer alone, even in the most solitary moments. It's not about religion or doctrine. It's about presence, an invisible force that seems to guide you, even when everything around seems out of control. You make decisions without knowing exactly why, and later realize everything fits together. It's not magic, it's alignment. The soul, when awakened, begins to connect with the self, the organizing center of the psyche, according to Carl Jung. And it's this connection that changes everything. Even when something goes wrong, you feel there's a hidden purpose there. Chaos is no longer just pain, it's also message. Each fall brings a lesson. Each loss reveals a direction. This feeling of being guided doesn't mean everything will become easy. It means that even in the shadows, there's an invisible thread leading you. The soul's call becomes clearer. It's not about controlling, but about trusting. And this trust isn't blind. It's born from listening, surrender, presence. Some call this destiny, others cosmic orchestration. There are those who begin to feel this through practices like family constellations, channeling, silence retreats, or even during intense meditation moments. The name doesn't matter, the feeling matters. And the more you surrender to this flow, the more you realize you're no longer in command, at least not the ego. It's the soul guiding now, but it hasn't finished its work yet, because the old you is dying. There is a moment in the process when the mirror no longer reflects who you were, but doesn't yet reveal who you're becoming. It's a strange territory between the end and the beginning. You no longer recognize yourself in the same tastes, reactions, places. And this, despite being disconcerting, is a clear sign of inner transformation. The soul, upon awakening, deconstructs. And during this interval, the emptiness seems frightening. But it's sacred, because only emptiness has space to receive the new. It's natural to feel lost at this point, as if you were between two worlds, the old one, which no longer serves, and the new one, which hasn't yet shown its form. This interval isn't failure, it's germination. The spiritual crisis reaches its silent peak here. You already know you don't want to go back, but you don't yet know where you're going. It's the womb of transformation, the place where the soul withdraws to be reborn. And however much it hurts, there's something deeply true about all of this. Many describe this phase as a nothing full of meanings. It's where spiritual self-knowledge begins to become lived experience, not just concept. Some feel as if they're floating between identities, like a snake that hasn't finished shedding its skin. And that's all right, because when the soul awakens, it doesn't rush. It removes layers, reveals shadows, rescues memories. And in the end, when the new self emerges, nothing will be able to make you fall asleep again. If you made it this far, you already know. These signs aren't random. They're internal maps, silent invitations to a journey that goes beyond logic, beyond routine, beyond the limited version of who you believed yourself to be. But knowing this isn't enough. The question is, what are you going to do with this awakening? Will you ignore it and go back to sleep? Or will you answer the soul's call and cross the dark night toward something greater? Which of these signs have you already noticed in your life? Which one impacted you most? Tell me in the comments, because your experience might resonate with other souls awakening now. And if something inside you was touched, don't ignore it. It's the beginning of a transformation that has no turning back. It's time for courage, not certainties. Time to listen, not to control. And especially, time to remember who you really are. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue exploring the paths of spiritual self-knowledge, depth psychology, and inner transformation. Your journey is just beginning. And if you want to go even deeper, I recommend watching the next video that's appearing on your screen now. It might be exactly what your soul needs to hear today.